incorporate Python into the Blender game. One of the first things you may notice about our game is that we have multiple scenes up the top. The first scene that we want the user to enter in is the main menu scene. From there, in our game, they get to select whether they're a player or a viewer. You can see on the P button we've added the keyboard command P, which connects to the Python script connect.py and to the aSetScene actuator to set the scene to play. So then in connect.py, this is where we actually connect to our XML RPC server, or you could connect to your TCP server or whatever other server you're using to be the server for your game. And then we reserve a group slot, which gives us back a group ID and a slot ID. We put that in GameLogic.active. This, we import GameLogic and we get this GameLogic.active thing. So we put that in there so that we can get it later. And then we print connect and then what we've just put in GameLogic.active. When you print, it actually prints out to your terminal window. And then we get the actuator, and which we've pulled up here as .getActuator aSetScene, and set it to play, and then we activate that actuator, which sets our scene to the play scene where a game actually is. Or if we right click on view, you can see that we set the scene to viewer. More of a direct process. From the viewer scene, we have please enter a group number. Then we have this group number thing right here, which we use a keyboard input for all keys. We log all these keystrokes as a string together, and the target is text. So this is the property in this string that's going to receive the string of the keys that they enter. And then when you press return, we call view.py, and we have the actuator to set scene to play. So view.py comes in, and again we use GameLogic.active group ID slot ID, except this time we get the group ID by converting this text to an integer. You'll see we get the object list. This is actually a deprecated function. There are several other deprecated functions in here. So if you find you're using this tutorial a year later, some of these functions may no longer work properly, and you'll have to find their newer counterparts. So we get the object, property text, which you can just use this as an array, convert it to an int and put that in group ID. Slot ID we just set to -1 because the viewer, so they don't actually get a slot in our game. And then we print out view and GameLogic.active, again back to the terminal window. And then we take the actuator, which was aSetScene, and we set the scene, and we add active actuator. So this sets the scene to play. So now they've successfully made it to our play screen. This text up here, we want to display their group number and slot ID. Unfortunately, you'll see later we change cameras and you can no longer see this text. But if you're in view mode, you can see this text. So what we do to do that is we put an always sensor. We select this, which says it's going to trigger. It's going to pulse every so often while it's true. And it's going to pulse every 50 clock ticks, or logical ticks. And it's going to call text.py. So what text.py does is it gets the object that is its owner, which is this text object. And then it sets the object text to GameLogic.active 0 or GameLogic.active 1, as the case may be. Which is why we needed to put that in GameLogic.active. It's kind of our global variable that we can pass around between our different Python files. Or if this is not greater than or equal to 0, which means it's -1, which means we're viewing, then we say slot view. So that sets our text up. One of the other things we want to do is we have cameras attached to each one of our monkeys. So we want to be sure we're viewing from that camera. So what we do to do that is we have this own property, and we connect that down just all by itself to an and then we connect that to set camera.002. So that will set us, this monkey, which is Suzanne.01, and activate camera 002, which is the camera connected to this monkey. We do a similar thing for all of our other monkeys. Now, another important thing is that we have property on. This property determines whether or not the monkey does anything. In order to be able to set this property automatically based on the slot ID from our connect function, we have another always thing that pulses every 40 frames. This calls save1.py, which is what saves the monkey, and then it also calls active.py, which sets up the active information. So in active.py, all we do is get owners, set the property act, which is this property, to gamelogic.active1, which is where we put the slot ID. Which means if we're monkey 0, if monkey 0 was selected, if we were slot 0, we should be using monkey 0, which in our case we did 0, 1, 2, even though the names don't match up with that. It will set this to 0, and so then own equal to 0 lets all our keyboard commands work. In the second monkey we have own equal 1 lets the keyboard commands work, because we want this one to work if we're slot 1, and in the third monkey we have own equal 2, because this is for slot 2. And then these connect to all our keyboard commands and our setting camera command. Probably one of the most important things for this is save1.py. This only exists on monkey 1. Because it gets called every 40 frames no matter what, we didn't need it to get called on the other monkeys, because it saves the correct monkey and updates all of the monkeys in this one file. So if we look at save1.py, which is the last Python file we have to look at, we start by importing a bunch of different items. Then we connect to our XML RPC server. We get the scene, we set up some base data, and we print that we're going to try to save and gamelogic.active. Again, this prints out to our terminal window. And then we take gamelogic active 0, set that equal to group ID, just so we have an easier way to refer to our group ID. We window.waitCursor1 and t equals sys.time. This lets us time this function. You can remove those two lines if you'd like, and the bottom two lines that are their counterpart. So then we use monkey 0, which happens to be named Suzanne.001, act, and we check if that's 0 to see if that monkey is active. If it is active, then we set object2 equal to this object. Again, a shorter way to refer to it, easy way to copy-paste code. Then we set position equal to its position, ori equal to its orientation, put that in array position, orientation, send that with group ID slot 0 and the array/list that we just made to our XML RPC server. If we're 1, then we take this, same thing, it's just we use the monkey's name that is our monkey 1, get the orientation and send that to the server for slot 1. For 2, same thing, slot 2, monkey 2. And the next thing we want to do, now that we've saved our location, is we want to get the locations of all the monkeys so that we can update them. So at this point, we're going to get data, and we're going to get the length of the data, because our server doesn't actually guarantee, if we're the first player, it hasn't actually made a player 1 and 2 yet, and so it won't send us any data at all back for those. So for I in range loop to 4, we're going to append kind of dummy data into the system, just to make sure that we don't get an error down here when we're trying to refer to array locations that don't actually exist. So then down here we check that data 0, 0 is not equal to this dummy data. Because if you put the monkey at 0, 0, 0, you put them kind of in the sky up here and they just keep falling and it looks really funky, and yeah, that's just bad. And then we set position, data 0, 0, because we put the position at location 0 and orientation from our location 1. And we do that for each monkey. Then we say plugin finished in this many seconds and print the systime 0 and undo our wait cursor. So that's a little bit about Python. A couple other things that will be important for you. First, you'll notice that all of our text objects have @ symbols and then the text. That's because there's a special way that you have to work to insert text, real-time text, that you can change into a Blender game file. Otherwise your text just disappears. So that text, there's a good tutorial on this, which is what we use. So here it is. We set up our RPC client, then we have some invalid group ID, invalid data functions. We reserve a group slot. This increases our number of machines, sets up some group slots. We can also send data, which just takes the data ID and puts that in another array index for the group data. We can get data, which will return all the data for the group. Get a random group, get the size of your group, and you can free a group slot. Thank you very much for watching, and good luck with your Blender game.